It is time for episode 7 of What If, a Denver Gazette video series where we look at the biggest what ifs in Colorado sports. And today we're talking Denver Nuggets. So I'm joined by Vinny Benedetto to talk about the 2012-2013 Denver Nuggets. Vinny, how you doing today?
Doing well, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, we were just talking before we started recording about this Nuggets team and this run and what just went on with this team and what happened afterwards. And it really kind of leads into where the Nuggets are now a little bit. So this team is coached by George Karl. The GM is Masai Ujiri. This is a couple years after. This is post-Melo trade. This is a couple years afterwards. You know, this team has Ty Lawson, Kenneth Faried, Danilo Gallinari, Wilson Chandler, lots of Corey Brewer, some Andre Miller, JaVale McGee. I think this was after he had that big series against the Lakers and they gave him all that money.
Right.
So, you know, and then, but also in the offseason, they get involved in this giant 4-team trade that sent Dwight Howard to the Lakers and Andre Iguodala to the Nuggets. Andre Iguodala at this time, you know, I think people think of him now where he's just kind of, you know, he's an old veteran, but this was prime Andre Iguodala. Like he was a star on both ends of the court. He was a really good player. So this Nuggets team they were a team, 6 guys averaged in double figures. They go 57-25, which I believe is still the franchise record for wins, maybe be broken this year. Who knows? They get the 3 seed in the playoffs. But the Nuggets are not going into the playoffs full strength as Danilo Gallinari tears his ACL in the 79th game of the season against the Mavericks at then the Pepsi Center. Gallo was a player, I think he was the second leading scorer behind Ty Lawson. He could shoot the 3. He could create his own shot. He got to the foul line. He was a mismatch because I think he's almost 6'10". He's a really good player when he's healthy, and he was a big part of the Melo trade. He really was. Like he was, you know, the star they got back, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So they don't have Gallinari going into the playoffs. The Nuggets draw the Golden State Warriors, who are the 6th seed this season. And this is young Steph Curry, young Klay Thompson, young Draymond Green, who didn't start until David Lee got hurt in game 1. They also are not coached by Steve Kerr at this point. They are still coached by Mark Jackson. But you saw what the Warriors could do in this series, and they beat the Nuggets in 6 games. The Nuggets win game 1 on an Andre Miller layup at the buzzer. Then game 2 in Denver, Curry and Klay that we know now and just go off. In Golden State, this is back at the old Oracle Arena, which was loud and crazy, and the Nuggets lost both those games out there, came home in game 5, only won by 7, and then went back to Golden State and lost in game 6. This leads to, it's another first-round exit for George Karl, which had many except for 1 season in his time in the Nuggets, which leads to George Karl being fired after winning Coach of the Year. This also leads to Masai Ujiri leaving for Toronto after winning GM of the Year. So there's a lot to dive into with this series, but I'm just going to ask you right off the bat, what if Gallo is healthy for that series? Because his 3-point shooting, his shot creation, his ability to get to the foul line, I think would have helped him against Golden State, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think if Gallo's healthy, that gives, you know, the Nuggets not only their second leading scorer and another offensive threat, but there has to be some sort of a confidence boost that would come with being fully healthy. You know, when you suffer an injury of that severity that late in the season, it kind of throws everything into question in terms of we have 2 games to adjust before the playoffs start. What are we going to look like? You know, how do we adjust for not having such an integral part of the team? So, I think it could be reasoned that, you know, with Gallo, maybe they beat the Warriors. You know, I don't know if they go much farther because I think they would have gotten the Spurs in the second round.
Yes.
And that Spurs team, I think, went on to the finals and lost to Miami.
No, that Spurs team, I think, lost to Oklahoma City in the Western Conference Finals. Then Miami beat OKC. And then the following years when the Spurs went back and lost on the Ray Allen shot.
Okay.
And then came back and won the next year. So they had, I mean, this was like whatever run of the Spurs, their 5th run or whatever under Popovich. But yeah, they would have got the Spurs in the next round, I don't think they played well all season.
Right. But I guess if that winning that one series is enough, does that keep George Karl his job for the next season or two? And then if Masai is there, are they not drafting certain players who are key pieces of the team right now? So yeah, I think to your earlier point, it's pretty easy to draw a line from, some butterfly effect stuff of, maybe they beat the Warriors, then key pieces of the front office and coaching staff don't change, and maybe the era we're looking at right now of the Nuggets, doesn't ever exist or doesn't exist in the same fashion it does now.
Well, it's crazy to think that. So those Warriors went and took a couple games off the Spurs in the next round. I think they lost in 6 to the Spurs. Curry just comes into his own in this series. He was the most consistent player for the Warriors. A lot of Jarrett Jack for the Warriors after looking at the box scores, but he killed the Nuggets. He averaged like 18 points in that series. It was insane. And there's just a lot of effect from this series because the Nuggets go out and then get Brian Shaw as their coach, which was 2 of the worst seasons of Nuggets basketball that anyone has seen. And which leads into Michael Malone and into where we're at now, the drafting of Jokic, the drafting of Murray, just where we are now. But it's crazy to think I want to talk about the George Karl legacy a little bit because he gets a bad rap for the playoff losses, and I get that. But this one was the only time they ever had home court in the first round. They always played the Spurs, or they always played the Lakers, or they always played somebody like that, and they never really had a chance. So, I don't know. I want to get your thoughts on George Karl's legacy because, Malone's going to pass him as probably one of the best Nuggets coaches, but he's got to be right up there.
Yeah, he's when I think back to watching the Nuggets, that part, he's the guy I think of as the coach, and it's interesting because that feels like that was almost kind of a golden age for the Western Conference.
It was, yes. Looking back, yes, it was.
You look at you mentioned the Lakers, the Spurs just kept that championship window open for 2 decades. The Thunder were, so full of young future stars that it was, not an easy time for George to try and build something in Denver, I don't think has ever really been a huge free agent destination. So you've got to do it different ways. You got to draft and develop, or you got to trade those guys you developed and to really get some star power here, it feels like. So yeah, I think maybe he's a little underappreciated. I feel like from his Twitter persona, there's some, maybe he's still not happy with the way things ended here and that he didn't have a shot to run it back the next couple seasons. So yeah, it feels like a kind of a chilly relationship, but I think he probably deserves a bit more love from the Nuggets Nation.
And you're talking about the Western Conference. So the Mavs won the title in 2011 with Dirk and that team. They're the 8th seed this season, and they lose to the Thunder in the first round. The Thunder just sweep them right away. The Thunder are Durant, Westbrook, and Harden. Harden hasn't been traded yet. Lob City's coming with the Clippers. So, yeah, this Western Conference at this time was ridiculous. I've got to touch on the Andre Iguodala stuff because this is another story from this series. He was traded. He was not a rental, but he didn't have a contract after this season.
Right.
There were rumors about him going to church service or something with the Warriors during this series. And then in the offseason, he signs with the Warriors. So there was a lot of, he's been called the mole. He's been called all of this stuff. It is crazy how it all worked out for him because now he's how many championships does he have? Does he have all 4 with the Warriors? Was he on all 4 of those teams? Or did he miss 1? Does he have 3? I don't know.
Yeah, one of those 2.
Yeah, I know he missed. Maybe he was gone for one of those seasons, but he really had this second career with the Warriors, and he is just a straight villain to Denver people.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't want to go out and I'm not going to go as far as calling him the mole. Like,
yeah, that's rough.
But it is just being around the NBA a little bit. It is funny how small of the circles become. People know people, and I think there are legit relationships that happen between players on opposing teams. That guys get really close, and we'll spend some time together. I'm sure during a playoff series. But yeah, that's interesting. Certainly that it all worked out that way. I remember him being, really a pretty solid player. And to your point, a much different player, in Philadelphia and probably Denver than he ended up being in that second career run with the Warriors. But there's a lot of smoke there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I just think if George Karl stays on the coach, you may not have the Nuggets you have now, because they kind of bottomed out with Shaw. They never got a super high draft pick I think they may have traded some of them away. I'd have to go back and look, because again, their best player was drafted in the second round. So right now, and Murray's their highest draft pick at 7. And Murray's draft pick was actually part of the Melo trade. That was the last pick swap of the Melo trade, which is crazy to think, because the Melo draft is 20 years ago this June. So this also starts Gallo's just the weird rest of his career, where he's hurt a lot. He missed the whole next season because he got ACL surgery overseas, I believe. And even this season, people were excited when he signed with Boston, and then he tore his ACL in Eurobasket, I think. Right. So, what do you remember about him? Because I do remember that he was fun to watch, because he was this 6'10" guy with handles, and he could shoot the 3, and he was kind of a nightmare, but he just never stayed on the court.
Yeah. And thinking back about it now, it feels kind of funny. Like, is he 8 to 10 years too old? If the way we think about basketball now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If he came into the league now, 6'10", can handle it, big body, fundamentally sound, skilled, all that stuff, like, he might be a monster.
Well, he's got a little, that's kind of what we say about MPJ. MPJ's a little slighter than I think Gallo was. But, 6'10", can shoot, I think Gallo had better handles than MPJ.
Yep.
But it's just these guys that now, when you're 6'10", you're not in there rebounding and banging around, you're shooting threes. And he may, he may definitely be in the wrong time, in the wrong era, for sure.
Yeah. And those injuries are just so tough, because the margins can be so small, where you have one knee surgery and you just don't get that full burst back. And that can make a whole lot of difference for some guys. And I'm not saying that's the case with him. But yeah, certainly a really interesting player. And yeah, I'd be really, really excited to see what he would look like if he was coming into the league now.
So here's the question, and I think I know the answer to, but if the Nuggets win this series, the Warriors still become the Warriors, don't you think? Yeah. There's no stopping that dynasty, I don't think.
No, and I don't know how much farther the Warriors would have gone. I don't think we ever get to the point where they're sticking with Mark Jackson and Steve Kerr doesn't happen. I just think the pairing Kerr with those kind of shooters and just the creativity they kind of came up with to kind of reinvent basketball to an extent. I think there's too much just obvious talent there that
they don't go to the finals for a couple seasons still after this, because I think they still struggle in not struggle, but they don't get to the finals for another couple of years, but still.
Right. And Draymond, I think, really improved or figured something out in the years between then. So yeah, I think it all would have come together one way or another.
So I think, no matter what, if the Nuggets win this series, I don't think, like you said, they don't get past the next round. That Spurs team was a juggernaut that year. Maybe George gets another year, but I think the organization was maybe getting a little frustrated with George. He'd been there for a while. They never really, I know he loved this team from everything he said, because I think he was kind of tired of the stuff with Melo and Kmart and J.R. Smith and all those guys. He loved Chauncey, because we know how Chauncey is, but I think he had started to wear out his welcome a little bit. Masai sticking around, we still see what Masai did. He had the guts to trade for Kawhi for one season and won him a title. Yep. He fleeced the Knicks in the Melo trade. Like, Masai, he could be trading OG Anunoby in 8 days. Who knows? And fleecing someone. Hopefully not the Nuggets. But I think that if Masai sticks around, this team's different. And so those are the big, I think, conclusions from this. Is that the Nuggets may be a little bit different, but I think even winning that series, things probably still stay pretty close to the same. Yeah, and I think the way things stand right now, I think Nuggets fans would be willing to go through it all again if it nets the
the same result they're looking at right now in terms of this is probably as good of a chance as they've had
ever
since then.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the team against the Lakers in 09 and 2010 when they lost in the West Conference Finals, and then I guess the bubble run. But yeah, it's funny how basketball was so different then, because I looked at a couple of YouTube clips and it's just the Warriors changed the game, and it was this series that really started it, and the Nuggets unfortunately really on the other end of that. All right, Vinny, thanks for doing this. These are posted every Monday evening at denvergazette.com. So make sure to check those out, and we will talk to you again soon. Thanks, Vinny.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks.